With the number one overall selection in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals decided to hinge their future and their franchise on LSU quarterback Joe Burrow, the Heisman-winning national champion out of LSU. And while it probably is a good pick, Joe Burrow is, I think, going to go on to have a successful career. I'm not exactly sure if picking their franchise quarterback was the right move for them to make at this time. I could be completely wrong, but this team is not, the way the Bengals are set up right now, the Bengals are not ready to be competing anytime soon, which not only might annoy Joe Burrow, as he's been quoted as saying he wants to play for a winner, but it could be wasting the first few years of his prime. Burrow is going into a situation in Cincinnati where I'm not exactly sure if they have really any direction as to where they're going. They spent this past free agency trying to retool their defense, and they haven't done an awful job. They brought in a pair of cornerbacks from Minnesota with Mackenzie Alexander and Trey Waynes, and they also shored up their back end, bringing in Von Bell from New Orleans, and added a little beef up front with DJ Reader. However, what Cincinnati did in free agency this past offseason does not offset the pretty bad job that they've done drafting defensively in the past decade. You've got guys like Geno Atkins, Carlos Dunlap, even some other solid names like Sean Williams and Dre Kirkpatrick, who have been with the team for a long time, but they have failed to really tip the scales in Cincinnati's favor. And you even have a couple of busts. I wouldn't really call William Jackson a bust, but again, he hasn't really tipped the scales in the favor of Cincinnati, and Darqueze Dennard has not played up to the standing of a first-round pick. And that's not to say that the first round, the poor drafting is only on the defensive end. Cincinnati decided to use their first-round pick in 2017 on John Ross with the number 9 overall pick, literally only because he ran a fast 40. There was nothing in college that made you think John Ross should have been a first-round wide receiver. It just was the fact that he had great speed. And there's also other drafts that they failed in the first round as well. Cedric Ogbuehi was not really a first-round pick in 2015. And Tyler Eifert, even though he had a solid, good career, it was hampered by injuries, and it makes people wonder what if they would have drafted someone else. So add all of this up, and we're at the 2020 season with the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going into it with a fresh face at quarterback with Joe Burrow, who apparently they've already been giving the playbook to. They've already given him his jersey and everything. But he's apparently supposed to be the guy to turn this franchise around when he has no help really himself. And before getting into what Joe Burrow has to expect from his supporting cast in terms of the guys playing alongside him, I'd also like to take a look at the coaching staff that surrounds him as well. And most importantly, I'd like to look at what Zach Taylor did for the Bengals last season. Last season, when Zach Taylor came to the Bengals, it was expected that he was supposed to be the next offensive minding guru. He was behind Sean McVay in LA when they went to the Super Bowl, and many people around the league thought that what Sean McVay did for Jared Goff, Zach Taylor maybe could do for Andy Dalton. And maybe while statistically Andy Dalton didn't have the greatest season, but I'm not exactly sure if everything that went wrong for him can solely be blamed on Dalton alone. Because when you look at his supporting cast, AJ Green did not play a single game last season. You basically had to hope that the defense fell asleep in order for John Ross to burn them deep. And Tyler Eifert, they were kind of playing the game like, we don't know if he's going to play this week because of injuries. We don't know how long we're going to have him. And their first-round pick along the offensive line, Jonah Williams, did not suit up till I don't even know if he's suited up or he's suited up later in the season. Add to that fact that they had a pretty poor defense, and all of that was blamed on Andy Dalton for some reason. And I don't want it to come off like I'm an Andy Dalton praiser or whatever, but I know what Andy Dalton brought to Cincinnati. He threw for over 30,000 yards in the almost decade that he was there, over 200 touchdowns, and led them to a couple playoff appearances. Now, his shortcomings in the playoffs are pretty much what did him in as the quarterback for the Bengals, but who in Cincinnati has won anything, really? They don't have any Super Bowl wins, and they've only been to the playoffs a few times in their history. And now the Bengals have officially moved on from Andy Dalton. He has signed in Dallas to be Dak Prescott's backup. And it hurts to say this because I thought Andy Dalton had a solid career in Cincinnati. It seems like the management for the Bengals has already done more to help out Joe Burrow than they did with Andy Dalton in almost the decade that he was there. Cincinnati has had a hole to fill at linebacker for a long time, at least 5 or 6 seasons, and they have failed to try to address that problem. There have been plenty of linebackers that they could either draft or trade up to get or try to draft, whether it's been Devin Bush or Devin White in previous drafts. Anyone really you could look at in the past decade that's been drafted at the linebacker position, there has been a chance for Cincinnati to try to take a chance and trade up to get one of those guys or just draft one of those guys in their original position in the first place, and they failed to do it. Cincinnati has had a problem with falling in love with possible prospect players who have one solid thing about them that they hope they can turn into a great 10-year career, and it almost never works out. What I really want to get into when discussing why I think Joe Burrow might be a regretful pick for the Cincinnati Bengals is I want to focus on what defensive players were available, specifically Isaiah Simmons and Chase Young in this draft. While I'm not exactly sure if Chase Young was at a position of need for the Bengals, along the defensive line you've got guys like Sam Hubbard, Geno Atkins, now DJ Reader, Carlos Dunlap. They've got plenty of guys along the defensive line, but adding Chase Young would not have been a bad pick. However, Isaiah Simmons is the guy I really want to focus on here in this video. If you don't know, Isaiah Simmons is a 6'4", 240-pound linebacker / safety hybrid that came out of Clemson last year, and he showed just how versatile he was in that Clemson defense, especially in that game against Ohio State during the playoffs. He literally, if you were to try to build a player and put him into Madden, you're going to build Isaiah Simmons at linebacker because he's fast like a corner, he's big like a linebacker, and he's very smart for where he plays. He's got to be the guy that's calling out. He's got to be the guy that sees everything is what I'm trying to say. And he proved he could do that at Clemson. The Bengals already have a Pro Bowl level safety. Even though he hasn't been to the Pro Bowl, I think Jesse Bates is a Pro Bowl caliber player. And I think just playing with the Bengals really is what's been hurting him his first couple of seasons. So the thought of adding Isaiah Simmons to that defense to pair with Jesse Bates really excited me because there has not been really a good linebacker in Cincinnati since Vontaze Burfict and Ray Maluga were in town. And Vontaze Burfict obviously had his issues, which you would not even have a nightmare scenario with Isaiah Simmons about, I feel like. And Ray Maluga was quietly one of the underrated linebackers in the league. And also, when you look at this division, you need someone to take away the other offense's best option. And now Cincinnati doesn't have that. And they had a chance to take it with Isaiah Simmons. What I mean by take away the other team's best option is to be the guy who you're going to match up with when you know that that player could take over the game. When you look at the Ravens, you obviously know Lamar Jackson could take off and run for over 200. He could easily run over 200 yards in a game if he wanted to. But he could also pass for over 300 yards as well. And Cincinnati doesn't have a guy to match that on the defensive side. Isaiah Simmons could have done that. When you look at Cleveland, you look at whoever you want to look at, whether it's Nick Chubb or Odell Beckham or Jarvis Landry. You could have had Isaiah Simmons be the guy who could match up with Nick Chubb, make sure he's not going to go for over 150 yards rushing or do his damage in the passing game, as well as Odell Beckham or Jarvis Landry. Isaiah Simmons showed that he could play corner. He could play corner if you really needed him to. And he ran what? He ran a sub 4.40 at the Combine. So he obviously showed great speed. And then when you look at Pittsburgh, whoever you want to say on the offensive side, whether it's James Conner or Juju Smith-Schuster, or whatever wide receiver is there, Isaiah Simmons was the guy to take the other team's best option on offense, not take it away, but limit it. And Cincinnati hasn't had that for years. They have not had that ability in years, and it's shown. They might have a good season and make the playoffs, but when it came to playoff time, their inability on offense to score was a problem, but their inability to match the other team's best option on offense was the biggest problem of all. Another thing that this isn't really something that is my main point, but this is a point that I think a lot of teams forgot and a lot of fan bases forgot about. I think everyone forgot that Trevor Lawrence is draft eligible next season, and everyone's been trying to fill their franchise quarterback slot this year. And I'm not trying to say that, your favorite team should tank for a quarterback or whatever, but filling the hole now when you know that there's a better option to fill that hole later, I don't understand the need to plug and play Joe Burrow now. When you have Trevor Lawrence coming up next year, you could get a guy like Chase Young or Isaiah Simmons to completely revamp your defense. One of those two players changes your defense overnight. And then when your team is actually ready to have that franchise player come in and take the reins and lead the team to the playoffs, he can do that. He won't have a hard time to do it. That's why I love the Justin Herbert pick for LA so much, because they have the defense to win. They have an offense to win. They just need Herbert to be solid. They don't need him to be a Pro Bowl quarterback his year one. That's why what Kansas City did was so amazing with Patrick Mahomes. They let Alex Smith play out pretty much his contract. I don't know if he played out his contract. I think they traded him actually afterwards. But they let him play a season, see how far they could get with Alex, and then said, we're going to play Patrick Mahomes next year when we fully believe in him. Not that we don't fully believe in him now, but when he knows the playbook, and we know that he knows the playbook. Joe Burrow has to be a Pro Bowl, almost Hall of Fame quarterback in his rookie season to get a winning record with this Cincinnati Bengals team. This Bengals team is nowhere near ready to win. And I understand what they've done in free agency, but look at the players that are there. AJ Green obviously doesn't want to be there. He had an ankle issue last season that he decided, I'm not playing a single game because this team is not ready to win at all. And they're probably not going to be ready to win with me there anyway. And again, I'm not saying Joe Burrow is a bad pick. Joe Burrow, I'm sure, could go on to have a Hall of Fame career, have a solid career at the least. I think that probably is that's probably his floor, is having a solid, good career. Probably better than what Andy Dalton did. Maybe win a couple more games in the playoffs. But the ceiling with Joe Burrow is a little bit lower than what other quarterbacks could have gone there. Like Trevor Lawrence, maybe even Tua or Justin Herbert or whatever. But their ceiling could have gone even higher if they would have drafted one of those two defensive studs, either Isaiah Simmons or Chase Young. But really, all we can do at this point is wait and see how the careers play out. Because Joe Burrow could, like I said, he kind of needs to be a Hall of Fame quarterback in his rookie season just for Cincinnati to have a chance. And he could do that. He easily could. We could watch the greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL in Joe Burrow. But we could also see a guy who's just solid, who's good enough to be in the NFL, but he went to the wrong franchise. And that's what I fear happened with Joe Burrow. And that's what I fear would have happened with any quarterback that went to Cincinnati. Which is why drafting up, getting the defense right, getting the offensive line right, getting the weapons right. AJ Green doesn't want to be there. John Ross is just a speed wide receiver. They drafted T. Higgins, which I love that pick. I felt T. Higgins was the best wide receiver in the draft. That's a separate issue. But this team wasn't ready for Joe Burrow to come in and be the franchise quarterback. Not yet. Because now what we're going to do with Joe Burrow is what we've been doing with Baker Mayfield, or what we've been doing with Sam Darnold, or what we've been doing with it's what we're doing with Jameis Winston. It's what we were doing with Jameis Winston almost to a T. We were hoping that Jameis Winston was going to take the next step, and that was going to be the Super Bowl for Tampa Bay. We're hoping Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold take their next steps, their respective next steps that they need to take, and their team has a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow is in a position to where if he plays solid his first year, he already is going to have the expectations of taking the next step and bringing Cincinnati a Super Bowl because of what he did at LSU last season and what hype there is surrounding him. And I hate that that's the expectations for him already. Like I said, he could blow everything out of the water and just play at the highest level we've seen any rookie quarterback do. But to do that, he kind of is going to have to do it by himself because of how poor the defense is and how poor his weapons are around him. Like I said, AJ Green has shown he doesn't want to be there. He got franchise tagged. He was not planning on coming back to Cincinnati. John Ross is a speed guy who probably is a bust. He more than likely is a bust at a number 9 overall pick. They've got other options like Alex Erickson and T. Higgins, but Joe Burrow really has to put the team on his back. He has to put the whole Cincinnati Bengals franchise on his back in year 1 to have even a sliver of a chance. And I just don't see it happening. Alrighty, so that is going to be the video from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, make sure you drop a like down below. Even if you disliked it, make sure you hit a dislike button. Any feedback from anyone at this point is really appreciated. If there's anything that you think I forgot to talk about, just make sure you leave a comment down below. I try to respond to as many people's comments as possible. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do like my stuff, make sure you hit the subscribe button, like the video, share it with your friends. Anything from you guys helps. And I will see you in the next video. I hope you have a good rest of your day or night whenever you're watching this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.